Sinister stories.
Mia hated the midnight shift at Burger Barn. The flickering fluorescent lights, the stale smell of grease, and the endless hum of the fryer created a monotonous hellscape she had to endure every Friday night. It didn't help that her co-workers, prone to calling out at the last minute, left her to handle the graveyard crowd alone. It was almost 1 a.m., and the place was mercifully empty. She leaned against the counter, scrolling through her phone, counting the minutes until she could close. The clatter of the fryers and the distant buzz of the drive-thru speaker were her only companions. That's when the car pulled in. She heard the rumble of the engine before she saw it, an old beat-up sedan with mismatched doors. The headlights beamed through the drive-thru window, casting an eerie glow across the greasy tiles. "Great," Mia muttered, pushing herself upright and slapping on her most insincere customer service smile. She pressed the button for the speaker. "Welcome to Burger Barn. Can I take your order?" Silence. "Hello?" she repeated, leaning closer to the mic. Then a low, static-filled voice crackled through. "We're hungry." Mia blinked. "Okay. What can I get for you?" There was another pause before the voice returned, louder and more distorted. "We're really hungry." Her patience waned. Midnight customers were always a gamble. Drunk teens, rowdy bar hoppers, or worse, the occasional unhinged loner. "You're at a fast food joint. You'll have to be more specific." The voice cackled, sharp and grating, before a list of orders spilled out. Burgers, fries, shakes, an excessive amount of food for one carload. "Got it," Mia said, punching in the order. "That'll be $87.83. Drive around." The car didn't move. The headlights stayed fixed on the window, the low rumble of the engine a constant reminder of their presence. Mia stared, her unease growing. After a long moment, the car finally crept forward, stopping at the window. There were 3 of them inside, a driver with a baseball cap pulled low, a passenger in the back with an unnervingly wide grin, and someone in the front seat obscured by shadows. None of them spoke as Mia slid the window open. "That'll be $87.83, she said, trying to sound casual. The driver handed her a crumpled wad of bills, their hand lingering too long as their knuckles brushed hers. The touch sent a shiver down her spine. As she counted the cash, she felt their eyes on her, too many eyes. She glanced up and all 3 were staring, unblinking. The one in the back seat tilted his head, his grin stretching impossibly wide. "I'll get your order," she said, sliding the window shut with shaky hands. In the kitchen, she worked quickly, throwing burgers onto the grill and scooping fries into cartons. The oppressive silence from outside was unbearable. She resisted the urge to glance back at the window, but the sensation of being watched was suffocating. As she bagged the food, the drive-thru speaker crackled again. "Faster!" the distorted voice said. Her heart skipped. They weren't supposed to be able to use the speaker from the window. Mia tried to ignore it, finishing the order and stepping back to the window. She slid it open and handed over the bags, avoiding their stares. "Enjoy your meal," she said, forcing a smile. The driver took the bags but didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned closer, his face finally visible under the cap. His eyes were dark, sunken, and cold. "You're all alone in here, aren't you?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. Mia froze, her throat tightened as panic bubbled up. "We're closing soon," she managed, trying to sound dismissive. The man smiled, a slow, deliberate curl of his lips. "See you around." The car peeled away, tires screeching as it sped out of the lot. Mia locked the drive-thru window and backed away, her heart racing. She checked the time. 1:30 a.m., 30 minutes to closing. She could survive that, right? But the uneasy feeling lingered. She moved to the dining area, wiping down tables and glancing nervously out the windows. The parking lot was empty, but every shadow seemed to shift. Every noise outside felt amplified. Then came the knock. It was faint at first, barely audible over the hum of the fryer, but it grew louder, more insistent. Mia turned toward the front doors. The 3 of them were there, standing just outside the glass. The driver pressed his face against the door, his breath fogging the glass. The grinning man stood behind him, still smiling, while the 3rd figure remained obscured, their head tilted unnaturally to one side. "We forgot our ketchup," the driver said, his voice muffled but clear. "We're closed," Maya called out, her voice trembling. The driver tilted his head, mirroring the same unnatural angle as the shadowy figure. "Let us in." "No," she said firmly, backing toward the counter. The driver's hand smacked the glass hard. Mia flinched. "You're going to regret this," he hissed. Mia bolted to the kitchen, grabbing her phone. She dialed 911, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it. "911, what's your emergency?" "There are people outside my restaurant," she said quickly. "They're harassing me. I think they might try to break in." The operator's voice was calm, but Mia barely registered the words. She gave her location and hung up, clutching the phone like a lifeline. The pounding on the glass grew louder. Then it stopped. Mia peeked around the corner. The doors were empty. The parking lot was still. Her stomach twisted. Where had they gone? A loud clang echoed from the back of the restaurant. The delivery door. Mia ran to check the lock, but before she could reach it, the lights flickered and died. The kitchen plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the faint glow of the fryer. Mia fumbled for her phone, turning on the flashlight. The delivery door creaked open. "No," she whispered, backing away. The grinning man stepped inside, his face illuminated by the beam of her flashlight. His smile was impossibly wide now, stretching to his ears, his teeth sharp and glinting. "Found you," he said, his voice a raspy whisper. Mia turned and ran, her shoes slipping on the greasy floor. She darted into the walk-in freezer, slamming the door shut and locking it from the inside. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she pressed her ear to the door. Footsteps echoed outside, slow and deliberate. "We're so hungry," the distorted voice said, closer now. The handle rattled. Mia held her breath, praying it would hold. Suddenly the banging stopped. Silence. Mia stayed frozen, her fingers gripping the door handle. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. It was impossible to tell. Finally, she dared to peek outside. The kitchen was empty. The delivery door was ajar, swinging gently in the night breeze. Mia stumbled out, her legs shaky. She made her way to the front, grabbing her keys and purse. She wasn't going to wait for the police. She was leaving now. As she stepped outside, the cool night air hit her like a slap. Her car was parked just a few feet away. She ran for it, fumbling with the keys. A low chuckle stopped her cold. She turned, and there they were, standing at the edge of the lot, their silhouettes framed by the flickering streetlights. The driver raised a hand in a mock wave. The grinning man tilted his head, his smile glowing unnaturally in the dark. The third figure stepped forward, and for the first time, Mia saw its face. It didn't human. Mia screamed, dropping her keys as the three figures advanced, their footsteps echoing unnaturally loud. And then, the lights went out. Mia bolted back into the restaurant, her heart pounding like a drum. She slammed the glass doors shut, twisting the lock with trembling hands. The shadows outside shifted under the dim parking lot lights, but the three figures were nowhere to be seen. She took a deep, shaky breath and leaned against the counter. Her phone was still in her pocket. The 911 operator had assured her that police were on their way, but how long would it take? Minutes felt like hours in the oppressive silence of the restaurant. Then, the footsteps began. Soft at first, almost like a whisper against the tiled floor. They came from the back of the building, near the storage area. "No," Mia whispered, her stomach knotting with dread. She grabbed the largest knife from the prep station and crept toward the kitchen. The sound of her own breathing filled her ears as she strained to hear. The footsteps stopped. She froze, her eyes darting around the dimly lit kitchen. The delivery door was still ajar from earlier. She cursed herself for not locking it after the last encounter. A cold draft swept through the room, carrying with it a faint, sour smell. "I know you're here," she called out, her voice wavering. The kitchen lights flickered, casting long, distorted shadows across the walls. A distorted chuckle echoed through the room. "We never left," a voice hissed from the darkness. Mia spun around, brandishing the knife. "Stay away from me," she shouted. The reply came from all directions at once. "We're just playing. Don't you like games?" The lights went out completely, plunging the restaurant into darkness. Mia's hand shot to her phone, fumbling to turn on the flashlight. The narrow beam of light shook wildly as she scanned the room. The grinning man's face appeared just inches from hers, illuminated by the glow. "Found you," he whispered. Mia screamed and swung the knife, but it sliced through empty air. The man was gone. Her phone slipped from her sweaty hands and clattered to the floor. She scrambled to pick it up, the beam now pointing toward the walk-in freezer. The door was open. A chill ran down her spine. She hadn't left it like that. The footsteps returned, louder this time, pounding across the floor. She backed away, her knife trembling in her hand. The door to the freezer slammed shut with a deafening bang. "Please," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Just leave me alone." A loud knock echoed from the front of the restaurant. Mia gasped and turned toward the glass doors. Red and blue lights flashed in the distance as a patrol car pulled into the lot. Relief washed over her. She sprinted to the front, unlocking the doors and waving frantically at the officers. "They're here! They're inside!" she cried. 2 officers stepped out of the car, their hands on their holstered weapons. "Stay outside, miss," one of them instructed. "We'll check it out." Mia obeyed, collapsing onto the curb as the officers entered the building. She hugged her knees, her entire body shaking. Minutes passed. The radio on one of the officers crackled faintly, but she couldn't make out the words. She strained to hear, her heart still pounding in her chest. Finally, the officers emerged, their expressions grim. "There's no one inside," one of them said. Mia blinked. "What? No, they were here. I heard them, saw them." The other officer nodded. "We checked everywhere. Kitchen, storage, freezer. No one's there. The back door was open though. They might have gotten away." "But," Mia stammered, her mind reeling. "I heard them. They were inside, I swear." The officer placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now. We'll file a report and patrol the area. Do you have someone who can pick you up?" Mia nodded weakly, though she had no idea who to call. As the officers walked back to their car, one of them stopped and turned. "You should lock up for the night, and maybe consider finding another job." Mia gave a hollow laugh, her mind too numb to respond. Mia went back inside where she planned to just leave the keys on the counter and leave, but as she placed the keys down, the freezer door opened slowly, which Mia saw from the corner of her eye, and then she heard words. We're still hungry."